Morning. My name is Shay Brown, and I'm the chairman of the Pennsylvania State Law Enforcement Citizen Advisory Commission. It's my pleasure to call to order our regular meeting. This meeting is now being recorded and will come to order. By continuing to participate in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. The first order of business is to conduct a roll call. Our commission secretary, Jamie Hicks, will conduct a roll call. Commissioners, please respond when called. Madam Secretary, you have the floor. Commissioner Sonnenschein? He's here. Muted. What, ma'am?
Yes. Present.
Hello.
I'm here, thank you.
Commissioner Tate is here.
Present, good morning.
Present.
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 Commissioner Tate, present.
Good morning, Commissioner Tate. Commissioner Lapis is here.
I'm here, but I cannot hear Ms. Hicks's calling of the roll.
Neither can I.
Same here.
Neither can I.
Lapis. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you a little bit now, yes.
Commissioner Lawful Sanders,
Better, thank you.
I am present, thank you.
Commissioner Boyer, Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Walker, Commissioner Summers, and we would like to welcome ex officio Deputy Secretary Norbeck from DCNR is with us today as well. That's everyone.
Commissioner Ash is here. I didn't hear my name earlier.
Yes, Commissioner Ash, we recognize you. Yes, ma'am. And we also have two additional ex officio members in attendance, Captain Christopher King from the Pennsylvania State Police. And also we have Executive Director Michael Pennington from PCCD as well. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, all. As a reminder for citizens in attendance, items under consideration today will be available on the Commission's webpage at www.osig.pa.gov/PSLECAC. Any citizen can provide comments directly to the Commission through the public comment form on our webpage. And any citizen wishing to be recognized may do so by completing the speaker request form, also available on our Commission's webpage. Citizens may also ask to be recognized and heard regarding items under consideration of the Commission during the day's public comment period. The opportunity for public comment will be made available after the presentation of each recommendation and before each of the deliberations by our commissioners. I will limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to ensure every citizen wishing to be recognized has the opportunity to do so. Our next item of business is acceptance of the meeting agenda. The agenda record has been distributed to all commissioners and is available to the public. Our agenda today we will have presentations from our Bias-Based Policing Review Committee and our Use of Force Review Committee regarding an independent review of 2 completed internal investigations of police use of force and bias-based policing. for consideration, discussion, deliberation, and action regarding resolutions to adopt and ratify the associated final reports. Opportunity for public comment will be made available following each presentation. Following the review committee presentations, the commission will host a panel of discussion on the state of police reform in Pennsylvania. Our panelists and special guests include subject matter experts, law enforcement, and representatives from each of Pennsylvania's citizen-led law enforcement oversight and advisory groups. I'm looking forward to that important discussion a little later this morning. At this time, is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Do we have any objections to the meeting agenda? Hearing none, seeing none, the meeting agenda is approved by unanimous consent. Our next item of business is adoption of the commission's meeting minutes from May 13, 2022. A draft of the meeting minutes has been distributed to all commissioners and is available to the public. At this time, is there a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from May 13, 2022?
Motion to adopt the meeting minutes from 2022.
You have a second?
Second the motion.
Any objections? Hearing none, seeing none, the meeting minutes from May 13, 2022 are adopted by unanimous consent. Next, we do have a few procedural matters regarding our critical incident committee. As many of you know, our friend and colleague Kelly Hodge has been nominated by President Biden to serve as judge in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Commissioner Hodge has served the citizens of the Commonwealth in this commission with distinction and grace. We are also proud of Kelly and wish her the best of luck with the confirmation process in the United States Senate. Understandably, during this process, Commissioner Hodge will be on leave of absence from the commission and from her duties as Critical Incident Committee Chair. As a result, as chair of this commission, I'm appointing Dr. Spiro T. Lapis as the new chair of the Critical Incident Review Committee. Dr. Lapis has been a valued member of the Critical Incident Review Committee since it was created and has the support of the members of that committee. Dr. Lapis has contributed many ideas that have evolved into recommendations for improvements to policing practices here in the Commonwealth. Professionally, Dr. Lapis was one of the first attorneys named as the best lawyers in America in 1983. He has been recognized in Who's Who in America and other distinguished publications. Dr. Lapis has been lead counsel in many of Central Pennsylvania's most important criminal and civil trials. He has taught trial practice, criminal justice, and political theory at the university level. He is a published author, a prize-winning artist, and formerly a nationally competitive three-weapon fencer. Dr. Lapis, congratulations, and thank you for your willingness to serve on our commission. Dr. Lapis, you have the floor for any comments, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only comment is that I hope to serve this committee and this commission with the same grace, and that's an excellent word, and that suits Judge Hodge to a T, with the same grace that she exercised during her distinguished service. So thank you, and let's get on with the business of today.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other administrative matters to consider at this time? Yes, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'm sorry. My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a procedural matter to bring to the commission's attention. We've learned that there is additional information from the covered agency in case number 21-0018P that may be of assistance to the Critical Incident Review Committee. And so I move that case number 21-0018P is the subject of Resolution 3 that appears on our agenda today. But I am moving that we remand it to the Critical Incident Review Committee for further consideration.
Do we have a second to Madam Vice Chair's motion?
I second that motion.
Do you have any objections? Hearing none, seeing none, 21-0018P has been returned to the Critical Incident Review Committee for further consideration. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Do we have any other administrative matters to consider? Okay. Right now on our agenda is a report by the chairperson, me, regarding our commission. But what I'm going to do is I will yield my time to our Vice Chair, Elizabeth Pittenger, and defer my comments regarding the state of our commission into our panel discussion later this morning. So Madam Vice Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, commissioners, and welcome to Pittsburgh. It's wonderful to have you all here. And I extend our appreciation to Dr. Emma Lucas Darby, who serves as the chair of the Independent Citizen Police Review Board in the city of Pittsburgh, for sponsoring us or hosting us today. Since our last quarterly meeting on May 13th in Philadelphia, commission review committees have adhered to a rigorous schedule. The Rules Committee did not meet in this quarter. However, the Bias-Based Policing Subcommittee, chaired by Commissioner Boyer, met 4 times. The Critical Incident Review Committee, chaired by Commissioner Hodge, and as we heard, succeeded by Commissioner Lapis, met 3 times, and Commissioner Sonnenschein convened the Use of Force Committee on 4 occasions. Between those committee meetings, commissioners have devoted countless hours reviewing material related to the matters under review. Today, the commission will consider their findings, recommendations, and observations. The exchange of information between the covered agencies and the review committee, for the most part, has been cooperative and instructive to the committee members reviewing procedural matters that underlie the covered agency's internal investigations. Unfortunately, statutory restrictions or interpretations thereof continue to hamper the provision of materials that is consequential to the committee's work. Today, we have representatives of the formerly organized citizen oversight entities here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. While jurisdictions and authorities are certainly different, many of the challenges are the same. Citizen oversight is often mischaracterized as adverse to law enforcement. That is simply not true. As an oversight process evolves, the oversight entity must establish a record of fairness, reasonableness, impartiality, and objectivity. In turn, law enforcement leadership has a duty to enable the will of their community and not obstruct or deny a process of mutual accountability. We all have witnessed incidents of inhumanity committed under the color of law by those unworthy of serving as law enforcement officers. Oversight must absorb and analyze these aberrations in context. Citizen oversight is the manifestation of a community's desire to improve the relationship between citizens and their police through communication, mutual respect, and trust. Under the guidance of Executive Order 2020-04 as amended, the chair and our resolute professional staff, the structured process adopted by the commission is built on these values, guiding the commission's review of internal investigations conducted by covered state law enforcement agencies. The commission continues to discharge its duties carefully and diligently in service to the Commonwealth citizens and law enforcement officers. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. At this time, I will open the floor for any general public comment. I know I've been informed that we do have at least one speaker that would like to give some general public comment. Dr. Daniel Navarre. Dr. Navarre, are you available, sir?
I'm here, sir.
Yes, sir. If you could step up to the podium. Thank you, sir. You have the floor.
I have the floor.
Yes, sir.
Everybody can hear me. Thank you all for allowing me to be here. I am Daniel Raymond Navarre, MD, and I'm here to ask for your help to remedy public corruption involving fraud and those acting outside the law. I went to West Point. I'm an honorable person. Everything I say, I like to give you documents. I like to provide you with the core documents that you can look at either now or later so that you can see that I'm not here to do to frame things in a light other than they are, that give you undeniable proof of what I say. So I have 5 copies.
Provide them for us there and we'll circulate them for you.
I'll just mention the exhibits as I go and I state the facts. Curiously, just yesterday, Governor DeSantis of Florida suspended a public attorney, Attorney Warren, I guess he's like a district attorney, for acting outside the law, interpreting the law as he saw fit, and ignoring the laws as passed by the legislature as written. From what you said, it's your beautiful introduction. No one is above the law. No one is allowed to misstate the law. Unfortunately, I have an analogous situation to the DeSantis situation. It exists for me, and it's against the state's two wealthiest corporations, Highmark Incorporated and UPMC Insurance's divisions, as well as their fully funded Attorney General Insurance section. Simply, they misstated the requirements for two Medicare laws to fabricate all probable cause, fabricate all damage, falsely levy charges, and they fraudulently gave standing to the insurance companies, which I legally had full settlements with. And then they denied me due process at multiple levels, as written in the laws, also as written in the Supreme Court and written in the Constitution. Just a little bit of background, and I'll get through this real quickly afterwards, but I want you to know who I am. I'm a Harvard-trained plastic and reconstructive surgeon. I did all reconstruction. I'm an examiner for our boards, and I'm a reviewer for our main journal. My senior instructor at Harvard was the only plastic surgeon ever to win the Nobel Prize. It was for kidney transplantation. I chose to provide care in a poor city in my state. That's where I'm from. Over half the people are below the poverty level, and we have the highest drug overdose rate outside the city of Philadelphia. And we also, unfortunately, we have the highest obesity rate as well. Over half of my surgical facility services knowingly went unreimbursed by the insurance companies. I provided care to the poor people in my town because this is the right thing to do. Prior to medicine, I chose a life of service early on and went to the West Point Military Academy and then served in the military as a combat special operations ranger and Green Beret A team leader. I was actually called out of medical school to go back in to serve as a team leader during Desert Storm. 3 little background points so you understand how things work. As a private doctor, I'm required to go through or to the insurers for all my payments. Curiously, I also compete directly with those same insurers to provide the same services and have the same facilities, even directly across the street from me and down the road. I have to go to my competitors for all my payments. A very important point is
Dr.
Her-
Navarre, apologies for interrupting. We're going to have to offer some time to the other public as well. So I'm at to limit your comments to just the 3 minutes. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Per Pennsylvania statute, the insurers they 100% fund the Attorney General insurance section for all policing, investigation, and prosecution. They employ the Attorney General section. There's one set of Medicare rules, and I provided those rules that are applicable here in the handouts. The charges made against me were two. The first charge says that I used a Medicare procedure for less than a quarter of the eyelid. When you go to the Medicare law, it says that that procedure is defined when you use less than a quarter of the eyelid. I followed the rules, and I was charged criminally for following the rules. The Attorney General and the insurers misstated the rules to make it look like I was performing a crime. The second charge against me says that I did not wait for pathology results before assigning my billing codes. The Medicare law states that when a lesion is excised, the correct code is based on the manner in which it was excised rather than a final pathologic diagnosis. Again, the Attorney General insurance companies misstated the laws to make following the laws appear like a crime. Those official misstatements of laws in court, in the newspapers, on the internet, and in the probable cause are provided to you as CD, ENF exhibits.
Thank you, Dr. Navarre, for providing that information for us in written form so we could have an opportunity to digest some of this. As a general matter, the items that you're speaking of today, the commission does not have jurisdiction over those items. But we do appreciate the fact that you came in and spoke with us. We do appreciate the fact that you provided a written form so we could have an opportunity to digest any information.
So you do not have
That's correct. This commission is set up to review internal investigations of either bias-based policing or use of force by covered agencies. And the items you spoke of that do not fall under the commission's jurisdiction and what our authority is. So that's where we are at this moment. But I appreciate you coming in. I would like to have an opportunity for some of our other guests to speak. So thank you, sir.
hoping that you deal with public corruption, which this is definitely public corruption. And that you have an ear to the governor, and the governor has powers at his expense to address the public corruption either by making me whole or starting an investigation.
We can certainly talk to you a little bit after, if you're willing to hang out a little bit after our meeting here, and we can discuss. And I can make sure you have a copy of the executive order, and you can kind of see what a framework of our power is as far as this commission is concerned. So thank you very much for that, sir. Yes, sir. Do you have any other public comment? All right. I think we may have some public someone wish to make a comment online. We have a hand raised. And I'll remind our public commenters, I will limit it to 3 minutes to make sure everyone has an opportunity to talk. So, you have anyone? Okay, thank you very much. So, next item of business is the presentation from the Bias-Based Policing Review Committee concerning the review and report of internal case number 21009P. A brief summary of facts. On October 25th, 2018, 2 Pennsylvania State Police troopers observed a vehicle with a missing rear bumper at an intersection. As they followed the vehicle, troopers ran a query, and the query indicated that one of the vehicle's registered owner had a suspended license and an active arrest warrant. The query further returned a photograph of the subject. Troopers stopped the vehicle for an equipment violation and to determine whether the vehicle's driver was a subject with the active arrest warrant. After they initiated the traffic stop, the troopers determined the vehicle's driver possessed a valid driver's license and was not the subject in the photograph. Troopers advised the vehicle's drivers of the mistaken identification, showed the driver the subject's photograph, and ended the encounter. Records indicate the troopers acted professionally during and explained the reason for the traffic stop and apologized several times for the inconvenience. The driver adamantly disputed he resembled the subject in the photograph and filed this complaint. Under the commission's scope of methodology used for this review, under Executive Order 2020-04, the Pennsylvania State Law Enforcement Citizens Advisory Commission, Bias-Based Policing Review Committee is required to review an agency's completed internal investigations concerning allegations of racial or ethnic discrimination and other bias-based policing complaints during interactions with law enforcement personnel to determine, one, whether the completed internal investigation was prompt, fair, impartial, complete, and performed in a manner consistent with applicable policies. Two, whether the internal adjudicatory findings and discipline, if any, were reasonable under standard law enforcement protocol. And three, whether there is a perceived policy or training deficiency. In accordance with Article 8 review process of the Commission's bylaws, the review committee completed a comprehensive review of internal case number 21009P and preliminarily found the following. PSP's completed internal investigation was prompt, fair, complete, and internal adjudicatory findings were reasonable under standard law enforcement protocol. These determinations were corroborated by examining PSP's investigative and adjudicatory reports, relevant interviews, and information provided by PSP during its oral presentation. Regarding impartiality, the review committee expressed concern that it was unable to determine if any conflict of interest exists among the parties with the limited information provided. Specifically, the review committee did not have access to names of any parties because this information is protected as personally identifiable information under Executive Order 2020-04 as amended. Without the names of the parties involved, the review committee was not able to perform any independent research using open sources. Notwithstanding this limitation, PSP's complete internal investigation was considered impartial based on the information legally available to it. PSP's completed internal investigation was also found to be consistent with PSP's internal policy and relevant collective bargaining agreements and guidelines established by the US DOJ, published standards concerning internal affairs investigations. PSP did provide the review committee with documentation to form a sufficient understanding of the underlying facts concerning this incident to identify potential policy or training deficiencies and potential root causes. Based on its review, PSP's complete internal investigation was performed in a manner consistent with applicable internal policy and law enforcement protocol, and no policy and or training deficiencies was identified. The Commission's Bias-Based Policing Review Committee preliminarily does not propose any new recommendations based on its review of internal case number 21009P, and pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 as amended, the Pennsylvania State Police is not required to file a written response. At this time, I will open the floor for any additional comment regarding this review from the Bias-Based Policing Review Committee. Providing comment on behalf of the Review Committee Chair Marvin Boyer is Committee Member Keira Bradford-Gray. Commissioner Bradford-Gray, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Chairman Brown, what you stated is accurate. We believe that the officers' conduct in this situation was both professional and reasonable. I think these are the types of interactions that we would like to see when we're thinking about how interactions with citizens should go. If you have a reasonable belief that something is going on or criminal activity is afoot or a traffic violation is afoot, you can reasonably pull someone over. If there are suspicions that you have based on information in your purview, you're allowed to investigate that. And once the officer investigated such suspicions and found that it was not accurate, the officer I think, properly address the situation, apologize for the inconvenience, and then let the person on their way. Those are pretty much the quintessential types of interactions we would like to see, and one would think of when police officers and citizens are interacting for situations that are non-life threatening. And so for this situation right here, we believe that there's nothing else that needs to be done. And we do appreciate the opportunity to review it.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, I'll open the floor for any specific public comment regarding this review 21009P. Do we have any public comment regarding this review? At this time, would any commissioner like to be heard in deliberation regarding this particular review? Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 1?
Excuse me, I don't know where the raise hand. I have a question for the committee.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Lapis, you have the floor, sir.
Commissioner Bradford, I see at page 3 of the review committee's preliminary findings and conclusions that it's noted that the review committee corroborated your determinations by examining PSP's investigative and adjudication reports, as well as interviews and other information provided by PSP. So do I understand, should I understand from this that the actual investigation and adjudicative reports and interview reports were made available to your committee?
Yes, we had some of the information that we had the report that the adjudicator had prepared. So that's what we were able to look at in terms of who was interviewed, who was investigated, and then the findings.
It seems to me from reading your committee report that having this information available, the reports, the interviews, the investigation report, that this was valuable to the work of your committee in reaching findings. Am I correct about that? That having this material available to you was valuable?
Absolutely. I think this is not the first time or the first opportunity we've had to review the report from the adjudicator. And I found that extremely valuable to put context to what the adjudicator was actually looking to discover. We had this in another situation that really did help us understand in that particular situation that there wasn't a reasonable opportunity to investigate, but or reasonable investigation done. But these are really critical. They're redacted, so we cannot see the identity of the people, so as to hide to keep confidentialities. But the information in it was extremely helpful for us to actually review what went into the investigation and then why the determination was made the way it was made by the adjudicator. So you're absolutely right, Commissioner Lapis. More information about how the process worked is always going to be better for us to make determinations here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. That concludes my question. Thank you, Chairman Brown.
Yes, sir. Do you have any other commissioner that would like to be heard in deliberation regarding this review? Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 1 regarding the preliminary investigation review report for internal case number 21009P?
I so move.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Is there any objections? Hearing none, seeing none, the resolution number 1 for investigation review of internal case number 21009P has been approved by unanimous consent. Our next item up is the Use of Force Review Committee presentation of the preliminary investigation review report for internal case number 21003, P as in Paul. Brief summary of facts. On February 23rd, 2019, a trooper responded to a report of the unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. The unauthorized user was described as a woman. When the trooper arrived at the scene, he observed a woman leaving the front porch of the victim's residence. The woman initially attempted to conceal her identity and gave a false name to the trooper, but the trooper later identified the woman and found she had unrelated active arrest warrants. The woman began to flee and the trooper chased, tackled, and placed the woman under arrest. The woman complained of a shoulder pain and was taken to the hospital for treatment. Under Executive Order 2020-04 as amended, the Pennsylvania State Law Enforcement Citizen Advisory Commission Use of Force Review Committee is required to review the agency's completed internal investigations concerning lower level uses of force during interactions with law enforcement personnel to determine whether or not the complete internal investigation was prompt, fair, impartial, complete, or performed in a manner consistent with applicable policies, whether the internal adjudicatory findings and discipline, if any, were reasonable, understand the law enforcement protocol, and whether there is a perceived policy or training deficiency. In accordance with Article 8 of the review process of the Commission's bylaws, the Use of Force Review Committee completed a comprehensive review of internal case number 21003P and preliminarily found the following. BSP's completed internal investigation was prompt, fair, impartial, complete, and its adjudicatory findings were reasonable under standard law enforcement protocol. These determinations were corroborated by examining PSP's investigative and adjudication reports, relevant interviews, and information provided by PSP during its oral presentation. PSP's completed internal investigation was also consistent with guidelines established by the US DOJ, published standards and principles concerning internal affairs investigations, along with PSP's internal policies and relevant collective bargaining agreements. PSP also provided the review committee with documentation to form a sufficient understanding of the underlying facts concerning internal case number 21003P to identify potential policy or training deficiencies. Based on its review, the review committee preliminarily found the following. Finding number 1, police-citizen encounters, Fourth Amendment considerations. Courts acknowledge that Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution recognizes 3 broad categories of warrantless interactions between private citizens and law enforcement, namely mere encounters, investigative detentions, and custodial detentions. Courts describe each category in more detail as follows. A mere encounter is not supported by any level of suspicion and does not require a citizen to stop or respond to an officer. An investigative detention or Terry stop must be supported by reasonable suspicion and does compel a citizen to stop and be subject to a period of brief detention, but does not involve such coercive conditions as to constitute the functional equivalent of an arrest. And 3, custodial detention or an arrest must be supported by probable cause. Examples of when a mere encounter may ripen into a seizure for Fourth Amendment purposes, even where the person did not attempt to leave, would be the threatening presence of several officers, the display of the officer's weapon, some physical touching of the citizen, or the use of language or tone of the voice indicating that compliance with the officer's request might be compelled. Here, the trooper responded to a report of the unauthorized use of a motor vehicle where a suspect was known to the victim, and the victim provided the suspect's name. The trooper confirmed the suspect had multiple unrelated open arrest warrants in several jurisdictions and received dispatch information that the suspect planned to return to the victim's residence. However, the trooper did not have a photograph of the suspect and only possessed general demographic information, i.e. race, height, and weight. Upon arrival at the victim's residence, the trooper observed a woman leaving the porch of the victim's residence using her hooded shirt in an apparent attempt to conceal her identity. While still in this vehicle, the trooper approached the woman and began the interaction. The review committee mapped the chronology of events and compared these events to each of the 3 constitutionally recognized Fourth Amendment categories of citizen interactions and preliminarily found the following. Under mere encounter, the trooper generally engaged in a mere encounter when initially stopping and questioning the citizen. During this mere encounter, the citizen denied visiting the victim's home, although the trooper observed the citizen leaving the victim's porch. The trooper advised the citizen that he saw her leaving the house and that the persons residing in the home reported his car stolen. At this point of the interaction, the only information linking the citizen to the alleged criminal conduct was that she matched the gender of the alleged suspect and was seen walking away from the victim's residence. Arguably, the citizen was free to leave and had no obligation to respond further to the trooper. However, the trooper told the citizen, so I'm going to need to get an interview from you. The review committee discussed whether stopping the citizen in this fashion as she walked away amounted to an investigative detention, and questioned why the trooper did not immediately ask the citizen for her name and identification instead. After the trooper asked the citizen her name, the citizen initially provided a name which did not produce a record when run through law enforcement databases. Under investigative detention, after the initial name provided by the citizen did not produce a record in law enforcement databases, reasonable suspicion of the citizen's actual identity became apparent. When the citizen was informed that she would not be able to leave until an interview was conducted first, such action firmly established an investigative detention. the custodial detention or arrest. The trooper conducted a field interview of the citizen, and the citizens provided a date of birth that matched the birth date of the alleged suspect with several open arrest warrants. When the citizen observed this information from the trooper's in-car computer, the citizen fled on foot. The trooper gave chase, announced several commands to stop, but the citizen ignored those commands. These actions collectively established probable cause for custodial detention or arrest. Here, the review committee expressed concerns about whether the citizen felt compelled to stop and respond when the trooper stated, so I'm going to need to get an interview from you. At that point during the mere encounter, the trooper only observed a woman walking away from the alleged victim's home, which may or may not have amounted to the reasonable suspicion necessary to justify an investigative detention. Accordingly, the review committee preliminarily found that such nuances and relative guidance and related guidance and training must be clear to reduce the risk of jeopardizing otherwise lawful arrest. The review committee also preliminarily found it is important to ensure that law enforcement interactions do not unnecessarily compromise an individual's civil liberty, and it's equally important not to compromise the appropriateness of an ensuing arrest and or application of force. As a result of this review, the review committee proposed one recommendation under police citizen encounters. The Pennsylvania State Law Enforcement Citizen Advisory Commission Use of Force Review Committee preliminarily recommended that the Pennsylvania State Police ensure all troopers receive annual in-service training, including Fourth Amendment case law updates, and specifically includes instruction addressing the distinctions between mere encounters, investigative detentions, and custodial arrests. At this time, I will open the floor for any additional comment regarding this review from the Use of Force Review Committee Chair, David Sonnenschein. Commissioner Sonnenschein, you have the floor, sir. We're unable to hear you, sir.
Is it the volume on your computer, on your physical computer?
Okay. If we can't get Commissioner Sonnenschein, is it okay if I turn this over to one of your other members from your committee, Commissioner Maines? Josh, would you like to say anything regarding this review?
Or quickly, and I'm sure it will not be as eloquent and complete as it would be from Professor Sonnenschein. But yeah, this matter, I believe, was handled generally very, very well by the police officer. Our only concern, as discussed, was at what point does the mere encounter turn into an investigative detention? And did the police officer, I guess, exercise all of his options within a mere encounter to get the information that he needed to before detention. And here, just in practice, to me, in my experiences, it was questionable at best as whether, when he, at the point that the officer, the trooper had indicated, look, you have to stop, or I need to interview you, I have to interview you, would a reasonable person feel free to leave at that point? And, I think that's very, very questionable. So the question becomes then, did the officer at that point possess enough information to support an investigative detention? Again, I've seen courts go both ways on similar situations. So our recommendation originally was to provide, just ensure that troopers are being provided updates at least annually for case law and well trained on police interactions with the community as far in terms of mere encounters, investigative detentions, and custodial arrests. Now, after making this recommendation, we did receive response from the agency and indicated to us the level of training that they do have in place. They do train troopers annually on these matters particularly, and I believe that they, as case law becomes available throughout the year, if it's something that is crucial to these items, further training is done, information is circulated. So with that, I don't know that we need to continue. I would move that we would rescind the recommendation that we've made simply because, you know, they're already doing what we're asking them to do in this recommendation. And I don't know if we can ask for more than that at this point.
Do you have anything to add, Madam Vice Chair, regarding this recommendation?
Thank
and
you.
rescinding?
I think Commissioner Maines adequately explained where our concerns were as we looked at this case. And then we have been satisfied that the covered agency does take those nuanced engagements with the civilians and the troopers very seriously, and that the training is adequate. So I would second your motion, Mr. Maines.
Okay, do we have any public comment regarding this review before considering the motion? Is any online public comment hands? All right, so we have a motion and a second to rescind proposed recommendation number 1. Do we have any objections to rescinding proposed recommendation number 1? No objections. Proposed recommendation number 1 has been removed from the preliminary investigation review report. Regarding do we have any general public comment regarding 21003P before we move to adopt the resolution? Hearing none, seeing none. As amended, that the amendment being that removal of recommendation number 1. Yes, Commissioner Lapis, your hand is raised. Go ahead, sir.
I have no comment on the motion to rescind, but I had a question about the report as submitted. Was this the appropriate time to ask that question?
Yes, this is time for a general comment on that report.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. The report indicates on page 3 under the section called Review Committee's Preliminary Findings and Conclusions that the review committee was able to, reading now, corroborate those determinations by examining PSP's investigative and adjudication report, relevant interviews and information provided by PSP, close the quote. Commissioner Maines and Commissioner Pittenger, I take this to mean that you had available to you, your committee had available to it, the general investigation report and the adjudication reports and the interview reports, all of which I'm sure had been redacted appropriately, but you had those materials available to you, and I'm sure that they were valuable as you were reaching your conclusions. Am I correct on both of those counts?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. And in fact, you indicated that when you had initial concerns, I think Commissioner Maines indicated this, when you had initial concerns about whether or not the trooper had acted appropriately, those concerns were largely mitigated by reviewing information that the state police made available to you. Is that accurate? I see Professor Sonnenschein nodding his head vigorously, and I'm sure he speaks for his colleagues on the committee. And one final question, I guess this is probably implicit in this, but the woman that had, the woman that was the subject of this encounter, was she in fact the same person who had the active criminal arrest warrants out there for? In other words, the officer that believed that he was approaching a woman who had active warrants was proven correct. She did have active warrants, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are the only questions I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Do any other, would there other commissioner like to be heard in deliberation regarding this review? Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 2 as amended regarding preliminary investigation review report for internal case number 21003P as amended? The Commissioner Sonnenschein with his hand up. Do you have a second?
Second.
Do we have any objections? Hearing none, seeing none. Resolution number 2 regarding the preliminary investigation review report has been approved by unanimous consent. Thank you to Use of Force Review Committee for the presentation. At this time on our agenda, we will take a recess. What time is it now? 19. How about we come back at 11 for quarter till 12? Come back at quarter till 12 and start our panel discussion. Thank you all. We'll be in recess. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for returning and joining us. Next on our agenda is a panel discussion on the state of police reform in Pennsylvania. Due in large part to local, state, and national efforts to improve law enforcement relations with the community and to strengthen the accountability of law enforcement personnel, jurisdictions have recognized citizen engagement and participation as being essential to public safety. As a result, the field of civilian oversight of law enforcement has grown significantly as a tool to identify system-level police reforms that promote transparency, fairness, and accountability. Nationally, more than 160 jurisdictions have some form of oversight established through enabling legislation. Here in Pennsylvania, our commissioners have engaged with leaders from the Commonwealth's law enforcement agencies, civilian-led oversight and advisory groups, legislators, community organizations, police reform experts, and other stakeholders to collaborate on best practices and share ideas for common solutions to improve relations and strengthen accountability. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce this incredible panel of experts dedicated to improving outcomes for our citizens while still supporting public safety through these important initiatives. Please join me in welcoming Tim Stevens, Chief Executive Officer of Black Political Empowerment Movement and former member of the Pittsburgh Task Force on Police Reform, Mr. Anthony Eres, Executive Director of the Philadelphia Citizen Police Advisory Commission, Dr. Emma Lupers Darby, Chair of the Pittsburgh Citizen Police Review Board, Jan Hammond, Director, Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations, and John Manning, Deputy Chief Counsel for the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, and Christian Stevens, Deputy Secretary for the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, Board of Probation and Parole. Thank you all panelists for joining us today and engaging in this important conversation. Generally, there are 3 models being used by civilian-led oversight and advisory groups, described as 1, the review-focused model, 2, the investigation-focused model, and 3, the auditor-monitor-focused model. Most entities use hybrid of the different models to customize to the needs of the jurisdiction and comply with its individual laws, regulations, and policies. The authority provided to citizen-led groups can include opportunity to review the quality of misconduct complaint investigations performed by a covered agency, 2, receive civilian complaints and forward them to the Department for Investigation, 3, remand cases back to the Internal Investigative Unit for further investigation, 4, hear appeals for complaints on subject officers, 5, recommend case dispositions, 6, discipline or revise departmental policies or procedures, and here, like we're doing now, is hold public forums. First, I think I'll turn the discussion to Tim Stevens. He's a former member of the Pittsburgh Task Force on Police Reform. Mr. Stevens, what are community expectations regarding police reform, and how can communities benefit from collaborative engagement with law enforcement?
I would never say I speak on behalf of every citizen of Pittsburgh or of all African Americans, but hopefully when I speak, a reasonable percentage thereof agree. because I agree with what I say. And I mean what I say. Years ago, when I was president of the NACP Pittsburgh branch, I was in our headquarters up in the Hill District, minutes away from where we are now, talking to a man who sat in this chamber for many years, Bill Robinson. He was a councilman. He became a state legislator and later a county council member. And we were talking, just the two of us, several years ago, and he said, of all the things I've dealt with in my political positions, the issue of policing seems to have always been at the top in conversations with black people. It never goes away. And obviously the George Floyd situation brought that to the front of America at a level we had not seen in some time. This morning, I sent a follow-up letter to our safety director in Pittsburgh, Lee Schmidt, and our acting police chief, Stan Grecki, and some of our community partners and other leaders of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, following up on a June 5th meeting, I think it was, July 5th meeting, and a June meeting. Two different meetings. One was on a follow-up of meetings we've had approximately every 5 weeks or so with the police chief, the safety director, several members of the police force, and community partners on recommendations that we had made from the Black Political Empowerment Project, BPEP, going back to a meeting of February 24th, 2020, meeting with the former mayor for 2 hours on July 8th, 2020, and the meetings that have followed since. We made 24 recommendations for police reform in Pittsburgh. The mayor sent back a letter October 9th of 2020 committing to a number of recommendations, almost all of them, and we've been following up. The email I sent today was a request to complete the cycle and actually share with the public in Pittsburgh the recommendations that not only have been received by the former administration, but those that have been implemented, begun to be implemented, about to be implemented, and the recommendations from the mayor's task force, of which I was a member, sat on 3 subcommittees, chaired 1. The reason why we've asked for that public disclosure that they've apparently agreed to is the public needs to know, Chairman, that there is progress, because there's a lot of frustration around police issues, particularly from the black and brown communities and marginalized communities. It's important when changes are actually being not only proposed or recommended, but being implemented. So that email went out today. Also, we had the Black Political Empowerment Project on the day that George Floyd's, the verdict came in about his death. We had a 5:30 p.m. news conference in the Hill District to propose the ending of number of the traffic stop approaches in Pittsburgh by the Pittsburgh police. Took a while, but Councilman Burgess, who sits at this table, did create a bill responding to that. And we've had meetings, and we will have further meetings to move to implementation. But there have been actions taken on the Pittsburgh police, on the part of the Pittsburgh Police Bureau, to begin to pull back from some of these stop and frisk. I'm sorry, stop and frisk is the next step, but some of these traffic stops. Why is that important? If any of that, I watch cable news too much. I need medication. But if we've been watching cable news the last few years, how many times have we seen the stop of police of an African American or Hispanic person, which is supposed to be a traffic stop, end in beatings, shootings, taserings, and or death? A traffic stop should not be a death penalty. So what we recommended were numerous traffic stops to cease to be ended, or at least reviewed. Fortunately, that process is beginning to take place in Pittsburgh. Reverend Burgess also put into legislation some stop and frisk legislation, because again, when people are stopped on the street, Pittsburgh only has about 23%, I believe, of black people, yet the stops were over 70% black. You can only conclude something is wrong. And we can only conclude that race is in the middle of it. So the stop and frisk legislation, we met down the hall on July 5th, and we are scheduled to meet again Tuesday, this coming Tuesday at 2 o'clock. There was significant agreement on changes to increase the strength of Reverend Burgess's legislation. We had two councilmen in the House and the staff member of the third. The legislation was about to be passed several weeks ago, and I came to this chamber along with Dr. Ralph Bangs, renowned researcher from the University of Pittsburgh, now retired, along with some of our white partners. And we convinced council to delay the vote and to go back and research and strengthen, and they've agreed to do that. So there is some progress. Some of the things that, and before I forget this, Beth Pittinger's in the House, and we have discussed this and partnered with this conversation on many occasions the last few years, I believe. We call it the Due Process Act. It's something that the Black Political Empowerment Project proposed many years ago. What does that mean? It means when a death occurs at the hands of police, that the local DA should not handle that case. Why? Because we view it as a conflict of interest. The same DA who depends on the police today, depends on the police tomorrow, depends on the police next week and next year. When it comes to potentially prosecuting those same officers, how can they be objective? How can they be objective? Members of my BPEP Planning Council, we call each other BPEPers. If one of my BPEPers were on trial and I was on the jury, and I have jury duty possibly this Wednesday or Thursday, how can I be objective? Let's be honest. So we think when there's a death at the hands of police or law officers, law enforcement officers, that should be removed from the local DA, given to the Attorney General's office or some independent. Not that they're going to be totally objective, because they too have histories of working with police officers, but at least they're not working with those police officers in that city, in that township. So we're strongly continuing to recommend that. And I think some of the national cases that we've seen across this country reinforce the importance of that, some degree of objectivity. And again, the citizens of our city, our nation, need to feel that the justice system is literally just. Unfortunately, across this country and in Allegheny County, when a black person walks into the court, often the jury is all white, often the judge is white, the prosecutor often is white. It's a lot of white. And let's be honest, if we reverse that, if white people walked in a situation and everybody was black, I think they'd begin to understand why black folks feel a little uncomfortable sometimes. So one of the things we've advocated is diversity on the courts. We advocated a review of those processes. We helped to get a judge removed because of his racist statements, partnering with others across the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. All of this is important. We're talking about recommending in our multiple recommendations going back to 2020 that there be citizens on the police panel, the oral panel. The oral panel is one of the last steps when a person is coming to be considered as a new police officer or as a cadet. And historically, the panels in our city, going back some time, were all white and often all males. And if someone on that panel, or if the whole panel had an issue about having black and brown and women on the police force, guess what? They may have been stopped in their tracks through the oral panel. So we requested that the oral panel now consist of citizens. So we have some citizen involvement as well as people of color. It also hopefully will give more confidence in the citizens of Pittsburgh that the police who are coming into their communities are being chosen in an appropriate way. We're looking at increased commitment to reviewing the histories of people. Some people disgrace the uniform. Everyone does not need to be in a blue uniform, because some don't have the psychological approach that's appropriate to interacting with all kinds of people. Literally all kinds of people. The psychiatric tests, maybe they should be re-examined or strengthened, background checks. And one of the things that we had advocated some time ago is beginning to take place is looking at the histories of officers coming from other police departments. And that fortunately has been agreed upon, that those histories must follow. We had a young man die, Antoine Michael Rose II. He should never have died, shot in the back by an officer who was formerly at the University of Pittsburgh, and apparently his history did not follow him. He may never have been employed. We're advocating for a full-time recruiter to really look at expanding recruitment. And in Pittsburgh, I'll speak of Pittsburgh, for a while the classes were beginning to reflect the population, only for a short while. But we've had what I call a re-whitening of the Pittsburgh police force. A high figure in the Pittsburgh Police Bureau told me over a year ago, if all the black people on the force who could retired, we'd be down to about 6% of black people in the police force. So the recruitment issue is extremely important. They've had no classes for a good while, but we're saying when the recruitment begins, there has to be a breakthrough in how folks are recruited. Mm-hmm. Because what happens now when there is an incident in a black community or predominantly black community, it's almost like a white invasion force going into a black community. I don't mean to be crass, but I ask white people to reverse that. If in Fox Chapel, I know you're from out of town, is a very white community. Mount Lebanon's a very white community. If every time you had an incident, almost all the officers who come in that community are black, I think folks would say, well, where are the white people? We feel the same way as black people. We want to see an integrated force, because we're not talking about who's selling a new shirt in a store. We're talking about people who have the power to arrest you, tase you, beat you, shoot you, potentially kill you. We want a diverse workforce that has the complexity in their mind of being able to deal with a wide range of people and be sensitive to a wide range of people. Community engagement. First of all, I want to thank you all for having me here, representing the Black Political Empowerment Project and Greater Pittsburgh Coalition Against Violence, and all those who are here today to address an issue that never goes away, as I said. Community engagement. I think the Bureau here has been attempting to move in that direction, and certainly Tiffany Klein Costa has been a shining example of how police can interact with citizens of all races and all backgrounds. That approach needs to be expanded, and they began to look at how to do that in Pittsburgh. On our task force, I was told recently by a staff member of Ed Gainey's office that a good percentage of the recommendations that have been made by that task force are beginning to be implemented, and that's important. It's another reason why I think the city needs to share with the public publicly that these changes are in fact not only being recommended, but a good percentage of them are becoming policy and procedure for the city of Pittsburgh. Reviewing tests for bias and the background checks I referred to earlier are extremely, extremely important. We had quite a bit, so I wasn't trying to go through everything, but we have something unique here in Pittsburgh that some of you from out of town may be interested to hear. I think it was November 2018, Beth Pittenger was with me along with the president of the NHB at the time, Rich Stewart, I think previous president of the Urban League was President Esther L. Bush, and some other representatives. We met with Chief Schubert at the time. We also met with the Mr. McCullough Coleman, who was head of the Allegheny County Police. He sat to my right. I remember people sit. But we had an agreement that was unusual, and I asked the chief a number of months ago, who's now retired from Pittsburgh, working for the FBI, when he went to visit and speak with other officers across the country, police chiefs across the country, he said Pittsburgh may have been the only one or the first to do this. We asked to have every police officer on an annual basis be required to read the You and the Police brochure that we created out of the death of Johnny Gamage, October 12, 1995. And we've revised it several times. Beth Pittenger has been my partner, and I've been her partner in reviewing this with the top leadership. And it is a document, a brochure. It was 6 panels. And on November 18th, Chief Schubert said, why don't we expand it to more information on street contacts, which I, as a civil rights activist, appreciated a chief of police saying, let's expand something. Right? So the commitment we got from the chief that day and from Coleman, from the police, superintendent of police for the county, was that every officer would have to review that brochure, which we're getting the community to do and the kids to look at, and to take a quiz that verifies that they have read it. And the police bureau created the quiz. Beth Pittenger and I met for an hour and a half with the key trainer of the police, Eric Holmes, who at the time was commander and chief of staff for Chief Schubert at the time, came in a few times. She then met another hour and a half with the trainer and another officer. And then she and I met, for an hour to review, and we published again the You and the Police brochure. But something as simple as that, we stood at a press conference twice with the president of the PFT in Pittsburgh, Nina Esposito Viscitis. Our chief was present. Representation from the Port Authority, who agreed to do it as well, was present. Sheriff Mullen at the time was present. Chief of the Pittsburgh School Board Police was present. Nina Esposito Biscaitis said something as simple as this brochure could help prevent negative interactions between the police and our kids. Prevent a beating, prevent a tasering, prevent a shooting, maybe prevent a death. Tuesday, 2 weeks ago, we met with the current superintendent of police, superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools, who's now the superintendent. He was acting at the time. One of the things we asked was finding a way to put that in the system so that every term, each student is taught that very simple, two-sided, 8-panel brochure, what to do when stopped by the police, you and the police. Such as, if it's dark, turn the dome light on so they know you're not hiding. I suggested we put it in the new brochure, Beth. Turn the keys off. Turn the motor off so they know you're not going anywhere. Put your hands on the wheels. Put your hands on the side of the car. Be respectful, even if the officer's not respectful. Because if we have in the brochure, you can report that officer either to the Citizen Police Review Board later, Office of Municipal Investigation. But they live through that occasion, and they go through it with not being arrested. If you have a witness, if the officer interacted inappropriately, have that information while it's fresh in their minds, record it. These are things that impact the psyche of our community and impact the relationship between the community and the police. As we build these opportunities and they become part of the culture, hopefully there's more trust created between the community and the police. Let's be honest. Most people, even if they have no criminal background, if they see a flashing light behind them of any color, but particularly if you're of color, from the stories we've seen across the country, and let alone to be a young black man that has criminal history, they're probably freaking out a little bit. So how we train our police is extremely important. One of the committees that I chaired was on training and recruitment. The training is huge. It's not the only thing, but it's huge. How our police are trained, how they become more professional in how they interact, how they de-escalate versus escalate. You can escalate a situation just by using your voice, by hollering and screaming, and you already have the authority. And if you're hollering and screaming, and people are already nervous because you're the police and they're the police and you're not, you're probably a little nervous, and you're probably responding very negatively for someone with the authority to tase you, beat you, shoot you, arrest you, and they're acting not only with that authority, but with an abusive language. You probably have a problem on your hands. So the training, sensitivity training, not only to race and ethnicity and qualities, issues of LGBTQI community, all of these things cannot be minimized. They must be maximized, if anything. So we look forward to, there is progress in Pittsburgh. I'm very glad to say that. I've been dealing with Pittsburgh police issues for over 50 years, even though I'm only 57. Thank you very much. But in honesty, there has been a commitment under the Peduto administration to begin to move things ahead, and to the police leadership and to the current mayor and his administration, and we look forward to the meetings that we're going to have very soon on Tuesday, following up on the stop and frisk legislation and hopefully finalizing that. And also the meetings that we've had for the last probably year and a half on the BPEP recommendations that were supported by our community partners, such as the NAACP and the League, Urban League, and APA, Alliance for Police Accountability. We partner with them on some of these meetings as well. So there is progress in the air. Is there progress yet to be made? Absolutely. We can never stop. The progress has begun, but the progress must continue, and the progress must expand.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I really appreciate you really laying out sort of the history of everything, particularly here in Pittsburgh, and also really hitting on the key point, which is there is progress being made along the way. One of the things that I was really interested in was sort of, as we go through the process of identifying what some of our problems are and then coming up with solutions collectively, one of the things I was really interested in is sort of, as we're talking to our legislators and our leaders and these sorts of things and different community groups, and community becomes involved with having a voice in setting policy for deciding what training should be done, and basically deciding exactly, just having a voice in how they are policed. So I think that's very important. And one of the tools that, you know, I looked at specifically was what's going on at the state level, but specifically with our commission, then what's going on at the local levels with the two oversight groups that we have both in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia. There's another oversight group also in State College that's just been developed, and the idea of citizens being involved in that process. So very excited about that. Really want to switch gears and really go specifically to what those tools are. So when we're talking about, if we're talking about specifically our commission, you know, we have the tool to be able to conduct reviews of the completed internal investigations by the agencies, and really looking at specifically use of force involving death.
That's a big deal.
Or life-threatening injuries, and then also looking at complaints of bias-based policing, how the agencies handle those complaints. So those are really, there really can't be anything higher than looking at making sure that if there's a death that had to occur, that in fact everything that the procedures going into that were followed properly, and it was truly something that had to occur, that there was no other option other than to take that life. Absolutely. So that's something that we take a close look at, obviously. We look at there are other jurisdictions in the Commonwealth, and I brought up sort of what these other areas are doing, including Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Some of the things that we have sort of been able to have progress with, but also recognize that there's work to be done, is just sort of what our authority is limited to as an entity. So our authority really is two parts. One, we can review the completed internal investigations and provide our assessment to the agency of the quality of that internal investigation in the form of our determinations. So looking at the basic stuff, was it prompt, fair, impartial? Was it complete? Was the adjudication and discipline reasonable? All of those things. Then also, while reviewing that, having the ability to make recommendations and training recommendations specifically. You brought up how important the training piece of this was, and that's something that the governor has allowed and provided that ability for our commission to do, is to make those training recommendations along with those recommendations to policy. Now, really what that, it sounds sort of, you know, it sounds like it's a lot of verbiage, but the importance for that is those policy changes and those training changes actually have impact on outcomes out there with our citizens that the law enforcement serves. So very much important that we do that work. And very much that we do that in collaboration with law enforcement, because ultimately we can make recommendations, we can do all the research and give best practice, but ultimately it's the law enforcement that has to take those recommendations and then implement them. So that is really where our focus is. And to that end, I really want to have a question for one of our other panelists, Anthony E-Race. He's the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Police Advisory Commission. Mr. E-Race, I really want to get some feedback on what is the role and responsibility of your commission there in Philadelphia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Urachi from Philadelphia. So the roles and responsibilities of CPOC are fairly unique in the country because we exist by ordinance, which is being enshrined in law. So our roles and responsibilities are actually multi-pronged, right? So there's the community outreach and constituent services role and responsibility, which is where we educate the public as to what different things are, like warrant service and traffic stops, their responsibilities during traffic stops, PPD's responsibilities during traffic stops. We also do constituent services, which is a function of solving problems, because everything's not a complaint. A lot of times residents believe that they want to call to complain, but what they really have is a problem they need solved. So we engage them and the police department, and we try to find a way to solve their problem. CPOC also has investigative powers. Now this is revolutionary in Philadelphia at least, where it's very, very broad investigative power. It's the ability to investigate individual instances of misconduct, shootings, really all instances of misconduct. That's all. I mean, we're not doing that immediately. We have a phased-in several-year build-out. We just came into existence in April, and we're the successor agency to the Police Advisory Commission. So we have investigations on we have that power, which is revolutionary, and we're looking forward to also doing NTSB-style investigations as well, which is issue investigations, which basically breaks down an incident when you have something that we always call awful but lawful, where it goes bad, but nobody really did anything wrong. But a change in policy can rectify a situation, or a change in internal culture can help avoid certain situations. That is actually an incredibly crucial responsibility, because that allows you to change how they do things. We also have auditing and monitoring, which is for internal affairs and broader departmental incidents. We examine every case that comes into internal affairs, the case file, for best practices, outcomes, investigative quality, in the hopes of improving the legitimacy of outcomes. Monitoring that we do is done selectively, like if a complainant is nervous about going to internal affairs to be interviewed, we can escort you, we can guide you through the entire process, we can tell you how it works so you know what to expect. We can tell you what outcomes are reasonable and normal and what they should be looking for when they review the investigative files at the end, which a resident of Philadelphia can do at the end of an investigation. The other thing is after action reviews. We're going to have the capacity to change policy in a couple of different ways. One, after action reviews, where we review incidents and try to find a path forward. But our policy work is also a huge part of what we do, which is the examination of all aspects of policing and the ability to monitor and sort of investigate and change things with recommendations in real time. Now, that's a huge thing. This is where we partner with the police department and also do things independently to try to make everything work better. Like the previous speaker was talking about recruiting. There is no dearth of well-educated, bright African-American males who have absolutely no interest in being police officers. That's a culture issue. It doesn't matter if you knock on someone's door and say, hey, would you like to be a police officer? They have to have a good reason why it's a good idea, which is, cultural in nature, outreach in nature, and trying to make the police department one that's attractive unto itself. It's not just recruiting, it's internal culture. It has to be, anybody that goes to work for any company has to want to work for that company. And when it's a police department, it has to be an honorable, decent place to work. And the goal is to change that. really our responsibilities are sort of all over the place, and we have a whole lot of work to do. But the legislation that was written and enacted in Philadelphia, frankly, is transformative, and it's going to make what I think is going to make the Philadelphia Citizens Police Oversight Commission the national model once we do our build out.
Thank you, Mr. Erace. I think it's really interesting how the different entities have somewhat completely different authority. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Emma Lucas Darby, who's the chair of the Pittsburgh Citizen Police Review Board. Dr. Darby, compared to our commission and Philadelphia CPAC, what is the role and responsibilities of the CPRB here in Pittsburgh?
Thank you very much. And I also thank you for this opportunity to be here today. The Citizens Police Review Board since 1997 has tried to respond to exactly what its intent was, and that is to respond to citizens' concerns about police relationships. I will say that the task hasn't been easy, but we've been determined, and under the capable leadership of Ms. Pittinger, that has continued for all of these years. One of the things that I think has galvanized some of the contemporary concerns are the situations that African Americans have had to face with what they consider to be injustices in this democracy, that all of us should be able to enjoy some rights and freedoms only because of the color of our skin. We have not been able to, but the Citizens Police Review Board is an entity that can respond to some of those concerns from a macro level, deal with policies, and hopefully respond on a micro level to some of those concerns. So we have a process in place where anyone who has a complaint against the police can file that complaint with us. It is investigated. Ms. Pittinger reviews it to determine what the next steps should be in it. The board then reviews it and makes a determination also of their position based on the recommendation that comes from the investigators. One of the things that we try to make sure the public understands is that we take the complaint seriously. We have certain rights because we are an independent board, and we can take it to another level, which I think is critically important that we have that status built into what we actually can do in terms of taking a citizen's complaint forward. So we can subpoena, officers to come before us if we feel that it's justified that we have a public hearing. It has not always been easy to get those officers to testify, but we encourage them to participate with us because we're responding to what the public has a concern about. And it's important for the public to understand why the actions were taken the way they were taken. We can come up with a recommendation, present it to the Bureau, and they have 30 days to respond to us. Sometimes it's not what we want, but the important thing is that citizens know there is an entity that hears them and will respond to them. I think we have been very good in terms of being partners with community organizations, and Mr. Stevens talked about the partnership we have with BPEP, but there are so many other organizations that we work with to make sure that we're being responsive to the public. A couple of the others actions that we've taken, for example, when a young woman was in a domestic violence situation, she called the police came, the perpetrator came to the door, he responded. The police never asked about the individual who had made the call. And the Citizens Police Review Board made recommendations to the Bureau. They considered those and put in place some actions around awareness of situations that when you come to respond to a call, you just can't go to the residence and say that you were there without really exploring what may have happened, and especially without speaking to the individual who may have been the one who made the call and the one who in fact has been abused and violated. I think that the mere fact that the board has taken positions on certain issues has shown that we care about helping the police to function better, because there are situations where we see that we may be able to make a difference with the actions that they take. I am a firm believer, and I'm going to deviate just a little bit, but I hope you can understand why I'm doing it. We are a firm believer that there are some actions you need to take proactively, build in the pipeline so changes can occur in terms of police behavior. I'm an educator. I believe that one of the ways that we can make some changes as we move forward is to educate individuals at a level where they understand what policing is all about, what they can do in terms of policy issues, how things can change. I'm proudly associated with the University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work, and we developed programs in the last 3 years where we are educating social workers to work with police departments so that it's not all about enforcing the law, because so many of these situations involve mental health issues, trauma, experiences that people are reacting to. And what happens is you automatically call the police because you know the police are the people who can kind of control the situation. That's law enforcement. I'm talking about responding to social issues, social concerns. Police don't always have that ability. I admire what they do, but we can't expect for them to be giants to cover everything that happens in society. So we've got to look at not trying to fix them, but provide them other services that can help them to function better. The educational system is a perfect system to do that. And, I can talk hours and hours about starting with little children and just, having the police officers being friendly to them, but I'm gonna stick to my graduate level where I'm trying to make a difference. And we have to have individuals trained who can, interact with the police and show them this isn't law enforcement. You got that call because that person was concerned with the situation, but all they need is someone to talk to. All they need is someone to listen to them. So, and social work programs across the country, police departments across the country are now hiring social workers to actually be a part of their departments. And I think that's the solution. So police can focus on, the enforcement of laws, but there are the other individuals there who can take care of all of these other issues. And that'll make the work of all of these supervisory and agencies that are trying to get at what is happening in society a little bit easier, because they don't have to try to do it all. There are components that can be handled by different individuals if they're trying to do that. And one of the programs that we initiated at the University of Pittsburgh was with Wilkinsburg Police Department and Chief Cookie Coleman. We had students placed there. Those students were able to go out with the policemen, and the policemen were very good about being concerned about the safety of the individuals, but they could go out with the policemen, and so many times it wasn't a matter of an arrest, it was a matter of listening and referral to a social service agency, because that's what the individual wanted. The police were getting calls, I need a job. That's not law enforcement. I'm hungry, I don't have food. That's not law enforcement. So there are areas, and we have to not retrofit, but begin to train and expand and fit into the puzzle so that we can take care of some of the dynamics. And I do believe that some of the actions that cause police to respond is because there's so many other underlying situations that people are dealing with, and the only way they know how to express themselves is in a manner that will cause them to have some contact with the police. So I really feel that as opposed to changing every person, every policy, let's also advocate for that level, but let's focus too on how we can help the police to function better. And in order to do that, there's a place for social work counselor, professional counselors, whatever the case may be, but there's a place for them in this whole policing effort. And I'm glad to see that the move is taking place in the United States across the country today. I feel very strongly, and we advocate for our students to be policy advocates at the macro level, and they do that, but then we've got to also prepare them to deal with these situations that are more acute, that are more immediate, and that can keep individuals from feeling fearful of the police, out of jail, and then, a criminal record down the line. So I'll talk about children and how we can deal with that to help with the policies at another hearing that you may have.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it so much. I'm going to turn to Jam Hammond at this time. I think one of the real important items for everything we do is the idea of the product that we produce having some level of independence, being able to ensure the credibility of the product that we produce and also the accountability of what we're suggesting in our reports. Jam Hammond is the director of the Pittsburgh Independent Commission on Human Relations, one of the nation's oldest independent commissions. Director Hammond, can you tell us why government relationships, specifically with independent and quasi-independent agencies, are important?
Oh, thank you. So, maybe I don't know if it's important for the video to get audio from me.
There you go.
Like, does the video? Oh, okay. I'm not going to touch it. That there are a lot of points that have been brought up, specifically something that Tim Stevens brought up. It was independence, and of course that was the question you just asked me. For people who don't know the city of Pittsburgh's exact structure, there are three agencies here at the city that can take complaints against the police department or the Bureau of Police. And one of those that Tim mentioned briefly is OMI. So nothing that I'm going to say is meant to say anything negative about OMI. The people at OMI do hard work and they do important work. For me, independence is something that's key. That's something that's different between CPRB and OMI and my agency and OMI. For me, independence is something that's key because it is really the only way that we can build trust with citizens. If you don't have independence, there's no guarantee of impartiality. There's no even hope for true transparency. And then where is accountability without the independence of our agencies? So the very first point that I would make is that independence is absolutely key to reviewing any kind of police misconduct issue. And though our agencies may be funded in part by the city, it is important to remember that we have citizens on our board, CPRB and the Commission on Human Relations, that have no particular interest invested in one way or another making a decision, and that makes all the difference in coming to determinations and recommendations that are impartial, that the public can put their trust in. So independence is absolutely key, and it's something that we can't lose at any time if we're going to make real progress in building trust with citizens. towards police reform and towards examining police issues. But the other part of the question, why is it important for government, the main government, the administration, to work with its independent agencies, agencies that don't have to answer to them, but do examine them? And it's important because even though at times it may not seem that way, we have the exact same goals. Our entire function is to protect the citizens. And whether it's the Bureau of Police in doing law enforcement, or it's CPRB in reviewing the actions, or it's the Commission on Human Relations in ensuring that all the actions taken by the city are free of discrimination, our goal is the same. Our goal is to protect citizens. And if we don't work together, if we're not on the same page, we're not going to get anywhere. Tim brought up so many examples of why it's important to have collaboration with citizens and with independent boards. It's because you simply cannot do everything on your own. You can't sit in a room if you're in administration or a city and just listen to an echo chamber of your own thoughts and then come up with the accurate solutions for the communities that you are meant to protect. It's not possible. You have to have outside input. You have to have people who are independently thinking from yourself in order to really create powerful solutions towards change. So it is important that even though we are independent, even though we are not reliant upon the administration and we're not a part of the administration, that the administration takes seriously that we have the same goal. We want to work together, and only by working together can we really create those powerful solutions to the goals that we share.
I really like the fact that you touched on those common goals, because obviously that is really important, and really what we're striving to do is be all on the same page as far as what we're trying to achieve, and it's all really in our mutual best interest as both the community and as law enforcement. Our Citizen Commission has had success working with our covered agencies to improve policing practices. John Manning is the Deputy Chief Counsel for the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, who's one of our covered agencies, our commission's largest covered agency. Deputy Chief Manning, how has the Department of Corrections worked collaboratively with our commission to improve policing policies and practices within DOC's law enforcement subunits?
Well, thank you, Chairman Brown, and as well as the whole Pennsylvania State Law Enforcement Systems Advisory Commission. With respect to Chairman Brown's question, I would say that working collaboratively, at least in this process, has been an excellent experience for the department, in my opinion. And it goes to show not only the qualifications of the commissioners and the members, working with the U.S. Use of Force Committee, as well as the value of those commissioners in their work. During these meetings, as well as in the findings, we found that the questions have been robust, well thought out, in depth, and making common sense recommendations. By no means do I believe that what's being done is a perfunctory exercise. It has included in-depth recommendations, such as, and common sense ones, such as the objectively reasonable standard under Graham v. Connor. That's something that we've been training for many, many years, but it makes sense to make sure that that's codified in policy as well. And we are working on and implementing those policy recommendations as we speak. There are some recommendations such as body cameras we applaud and we're in favor of. I think that there may need to be legislation, specifically amending the Wiretap Act. There is pending legislation, House Bill 2344, that can address that. So that may be something to look at as well. I also want to mention that, I think it's been an easy transition to some extent for the department, and when it was the predecessor as the board, because the field supervision staff has had work with what we call citizen advisory committees. That's been around since the mid-1980s, and it's been part of our regulations, and it's also been codified again as part of Act 59 of 2021, which was passed last year, that the department is to use these citizens advisory committees. It's under 37 Pennsylvania Code 77.1, 77.2. It directs that the district directors appoint persons, a 7-member committee made up of residents of each county, and that they be part of ethnic minorities as well, specifically in those regulations. And the department has been using these for many, many years. I know Deputy Secretary Stevens can talk about that as well. The last thing I will say, and I think the last panelist had talked about an echo chamber, and I think, when we talk about policies, and internally we have policies, and believe it or not, there are sometimes disputes. But sometimes you get into the echo chamber of this is the right way to go and this is the right way to do things. When you have an external commission such as the Citizens Advisory Commission here, I think it allows that imprimatur, that ratification of these types of findings, these common sense findings, such as we've seen that the commission has brought through, that can really help push to have those good common sense policies made and ratified by agencies. So again, I think we would look forward to, again, working with the commission in the future, very much so, because I think it has been an outstanding experience so far.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Manning. I'll turn to Deputy Secretary Stevens. Christian Stevens is the Deputy Secretary for the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. Deputy Secretary Stevens, how has DOC worked collaboratively with the Commission, and how has this collaboration benefited the department, its agents, and the citizens it serves?
First, I'd like to thank the Commission for inviting us here today. I think our partnership with the Commission has been great. We encourage, and I think it's part of the department's overall goal, is to create a culture of accountability and not just a culture of consequence. And so as we work with our staff and we work with the reentrants in the community, our goal is to help heal communities. About 5 years ago, we changed our approach to supervision, and within that time, we've shut down about 5 offices. And we've gone to a mobile model. And that model is about taking parole agents and immersing them in the communities that they're responsible for supervising, and changing the mindset of those agents that they are no longer responsible for managing a caseload, but they're responsible for managing a community. And what we've come to find is that as they're immersed in the community, they get to know the lady who runs the mom and pop shop store on the corner, and they get to know the families and not just the reentrant that they're working with, that this wraparound approach to not just the reentrants, but the wraparound approach to these communities is going to be crucial to us, one, reducing recidivism, but helping to heal, so many of these broken communities. I want to say about 3 years ago, we partnered with University of Penn. I'll just give you an idea of some of the stuff we've done. We partnered with University of Penn to bring their medical students into our parole office, so that when reentrants were coming to meet with their parole agent, while they were waiting, they could get a wellness checkup. And so that was the beginning of really starting to change the mindset that the parole office is not a place where I come to get in trouble, but the parole office is a place where I can come get help. And so how do we, and we took on understanding how parole was perceived. For many people, parole is really just an enigma. They don't know what parole is. Are they social workers or are they law enforcement? And now that's not only with the communities we deal with other law enforcement agencies. Are they 100% law enforcement, or are they social workers who just provide social services? And the reality is we do all of that. And we need to position ourselves, and we've been working to position ourselves to bridge the gaps in these communities. So we can bridge the gap between law enforcement and communities where there needs to be some understanding. On any given day, a parole officer is sitting in someone's house working with the family, and then later at night maybe on a task force. So we work with these entities. But at the same time, they're working with the drug and alcohol, the mental health, the social services aspects also. And so we've been working probably over the last 5 years to really change how we do business and how we're perceived in these communities. We have been, and what we've come to understand is the importance of specialization. That one, all these communities are different. And so we can't just have a one cover-all approach to how we go into these communities. But every caseload is different. So now we have gone to where we created mental health caseloads. We have drug and alcohol caseloads. We have sex offender caseloads. We have intensive caseloads. And we've really gone down this road of specialization, but not only doing that, but partnering with the experts in these fields to help develop those curriculums. And so we worked with DDAP to develop a specific curriculum for our parole agents around drug and alcohol. We worked with OMSOS to create one for our mental health. So, I mean, that's the path that we're going down. And what we're starting to see, and it's taken time, is that we're starting to see it pay off. We're starting to see how people perceive parole is starting to change in these communities. Just Tuesday, one of our agents was on his way to the Chester office, and there was an individual getting ready to jump off a bridge onto 95. And Agent Gray, he stopped, and as the police were all around, the law enforcement, normal law enforcement was agitating this individual. But Agent Gray was a mental health agent, so he was trained in this. And so he was able to talk this guy down, start talking about the guy's son, and tell me more about your son, until he could get close enough to pull him in and save his life. And so the partnership that we have with this commission is valuable because it holds us accountable, right? What we're charged to do is not just maintain public safety, but have individuals come home and work to understand what their issues are and keep them home. And where there are issues around use of force or any issues, we're 100% transparent because we want to be held accountable that we're doing the job that we've been charged to do.
Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary Stevens. I think overall, as we asked the question, which was sort of the purpose of our platform here, was what really is the state of police reform? And I think Mr. Stevens hit on it very, very early on about we made a lot of progress, but there's a lot that needs to be done. So I think that's where we are right now. When we look at our commission specifically, right now, we had a lot of work that we were doing to set up our commission over the first 18 months of its existence. Since that time, we've gotten to our December meeting, which was the first meeting that we've had recommendations that we made to the various covered agencies. And since that time, we've had 9 final reports that went out to those agencies that included 50 recommendations and sub-recommendations for improvements to those policing practices that we've been discussing here today. The progress is that 70% of those recommendations have been either implemented or are actively being worked on to be implemented. So that is significant progress, particularly in that period of time, specifically on the statewide level. Now, we have obviously a long history here in Pittsburgh on progress towards police reform with Beth and, of course, Dr. Darby and folks working here. But even with all the years of work that have gone into this, we still are at this stage of progress, but there's work to be done. So at this time, I think I really want to open the floor to questions and comments from for our panelists, from our commissioners out there. So I'll open the floor at this time. I think I saw Commissioner Bradford Gray's hand up a while ago, but I'll certainly acknowledge you now, ma'am. Commissioner Bradford Gray, go right ahead.
But thank you so much, Chairman Brown, and thank you to all the people who have spoken today about their models and, of course, about their hopes for the future of policing and community relations, because this is the whole goal. And I really appreciated the information that was just given by the last gentleman. It was really an opportunity to talk about the evolution of monitoring and working with people in these communities and in these spaces. We cannot continue to do things the same way. We've got to understand that there are different social issues that we're dealing with, but also different tools to use to make sure that interactions are fair, and of course, interactions are professional, but also people are actually advancing so that public safety, the goal of public safety, can be achieved. That's it. That's really what we're trying to do. With that, I wanted to ask and I apologize if I am not getting your name right, but the individual that is over the Police Advisory Commission in Pittsburgh. With respect to your powers and your abilities, are you able to help influence training from a community's perspective? One of the things that I think that really needs to happen is that police need to be more engaged and knowledgeable about certain trends and certain issues that communities face when they interact with police, so that they don't misread or misinterpret some of the actions to be something different than what they are. I've heard a lot about interpretation of the actions that go into totality of the circumstances of officers when they decide what they're going to do and how they're going to approach a situation. But sometimes the community's complexities and the community's complexion can get in the way of that interpretation. And what I am looking forward to is seeing how communities educate police in terms of how they feel when police come into their neighborhoods, what goes into their thought process when they're either pulled over or held at gunpoint. These are things that officers need to understand about the responses so they can interpret those appropriately and accordingly, and maybe change course if it calls for that, and if there's a possibility to do that. So this is just something I'm asking about. This is something I hope that our Pennsylvania State Law Enforcement Advisory Commission will start to engage in more. I know Commissioner Ash was able to have a training in her area about autism or the mental health and how that interacts with police commands. But I really want to see a different opportunity for police to be educated by community members in terms of what their perceptions are, how they interact, how they react, and how they perceive officers as they are policing and patrolling their neighborhoods.
We have worked continuously with the Bureau here, and there are several levels that are addressing exactly what you're talking about. The Bureau has community safety committees that actually meet in neighborhoods here in Pittsburgh. And citizens come out to that meeting and they talk about what's going on in the community, what they want to see the police address. And I can only speak for my community since those are the meetings I attend, but the representatives from the Bureau take that information back to the chief and talk about what needs to happen to keep the policemen more informed. I have seen that to be effective in several of the issues we've talked about around some of the social concerns within communities. In addition to that, I can say that the Citizens Police Review Board here has had a very good relationship with several of the last chiefs that have been in the Pittsburgh area, where we've had discussions about the concerns within communities that bring it to a level where there may be contact with policemen, and that individuals, the police officers in those communities, need to be aware of those social issues. It's a continuous process, but I can say that those conversations have taken place, and even with the recommendations from the last commission that the former mayor had established, some of those came out in the recommendations that were given to the city for consideration. So I know that there are efforts afoot to make the officers more aware of what is going on in the community, what are the concerns of the community, how they view policemen, what can be done differently so that the relationships amongst officers can be better. But it's a process that we'll have to continue to work on. But I do feel that efforts are being made here in Pittsburgh for that.
And just to piggyback really briefly, Chairman Brown, this is something, when I had started on this commission, I got a nice training from the Pennsylvania State Law Enforcement at the Academy. And I learned a lot of things that I really didn't have the ability to understand from the outside looking in. But that training was so intricate and so detailed and so very personal, it really gave me an opportunity to see things from their lens. I would love to see a formalized process where community puts the certain trainings information into the same type of PowerPoint presentation or video presentation for people to get and have as a part of their cadet training process. And whatever that may look like, that we may need to get some educational or academic institution to help. But if there are things and information that we can gather from all of these complaints, from the work you're doing in Pittsburgh, to really see a pattern and then an opportunity to really share at a real level where it comes to, we formulate these things into a complete training program rather than just community discussion. We take all that information and really put it into a training program just like the state police do. I really think this would be something that could be very useful if it's intentional and designed based on all the information that we've gotten. And I really want to see if we can work together on that as a state, because I do think it will be powerful and informative. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak, Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Commissioner Bradford Gray. Commissioner Pennington. Is he muted?
You'd think I'd learned that by now after 2+ years on virtual, but thank you, Chair Brown, and thank you to all the panelists for your excellent testimony. And just a few comments, and I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Bradford Gray said, because she made some excellent points. And I wanted the commission and folks on this meeting today to be aware of, as part of the 22-23 state budget, Governor Wolf signed House Bill 1421, which was part of the fiscal code, and it established a local law enforcement grant program within our Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And I think that funding, it's $135 million that I think will help support a number of the things that the panelists, maybe not all of them, but a number of the things that the panelists described today, because that funding is going to go to law enforcement agencies for a number of things around technology, hardware and software, body-worn cameras, co-responder models of helping law enforcement deal with issues, with social workers and having to pair them with law enforcement, those types of programs, crisis intervention specialists, including civilian community relations specialists, and programs that support increased diversity and retention and recruitment programs, policy development, evidence-based practices, and training, which include crisis intervention, use of force, implicit bias training, de-escalation training, and a number of different training efforts. And I can't get into too many details on this, but it will be a competitive process that will be opening up probably in the next, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that those resources will be coming out and available, certainly by the end of this month. And regarding, we also have a mental health and justice advisory committee that just met this week that really looks at the intersection of mental health and justice, trying to keep folks with mental health issues, issues around the autism spectrum, keeping them out of the justice system through diversion and other program efforts. And also, just one other thing, as part of the fiscal code and the budget, there was a behavioral health commission established within the Department of Human Services that's going to be meeting over the next few months to look at, they're to meet and develop a report that to help target funding. $100 million was set aside for adult behavioral health to look at a variety of things, you know, the intersection of behavioral health and the criminal justice system, behavioral health, workforce development, and a number of different other things. So, I mean, hopefully, you know, a lot of these different initiatives can help support, you know, a lot of the things that we're talking about here today. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Pennington. Commissioner Lapis.
First of all, I thought every single one of those presentations was absolutely wonderful. And the, you know, the big takeaway that I found myself thinking about was that in order to identify, and more than identify, in order to address the problems that exist with regards to policing in this Commonwealth and elsewhere, we need information. Many of the speakers said that they work for agencies or work with agencies that have investigative powers. Someone said that, I think it was the Pittsburgh, Dr. Darby said that her agency has subpoena power. That obviously is something we do not have. We as a commission do not have investigative powers, we do not have subpoena powers. But it's critical that we have access to as much information as possible. Our Chairman Brown really put his finger on the, I think, the pulse of this commission in his introductory remarks when he said we have the tools of being able to review completed internal investigations. Sometimes it's tempting to miss the forest for the trees and think that this is a commission that has been instituted and put into place so that we can review internal investigation reports, and that's our purpose. That is not our purpose. That is a tool we have been given to serve our purpose. And our purpose, according to the governor's executive order, is, I'm quoting now, to improve policing practices within law enforcement agencies. So I hope that we all, and I believe that through my conversations with other commissioners, I think we do, but I'll just state this in the interest of being a pain in the neck about it. I believe that we have to keep our eye on the prize, that what we are trying to do is improve policing. Our goal is not just to conduct, you know, micromanaged reviews of specific reports and to see, you know, whether the I's have been dotted. That is a tool that we have been given to achieve a greater function. And I think that at least some of the covered agencies probably recognize this, and I want to thank specifically Deputy Secretary Stevens when he spoke repeatedly and I think eloquently of engaging in a partnership with our commission. You know, we want to be, speaking for the commissioners that I think agree with me, we want to be in partnership with the agency. We don't want to engage in a one-upsmanship and you know, issue dueling letters and, you know, please give us this, no we won't, yes you will. You know, that's not what, that doesn't accomplish anything. I wish that everybody would just read Deputy Secretary Stevens' comments again and try to internalize them. We have to act in partnership, and to the extent that the covered agencies view us as the you know, the enemy or the outlier, that's not us. That's not us. We want to improve policing in the Commonwealth, and everyone should be willing to work together in partnership towards that goal. That's all I have to say. Thank you, and thank you to all the guests that came forward today. I really think it's been a very wonderful and meaningful opportunity to hear you all. So thanks again.
Thank you, Commissioner Lapis. Do we have any other commissioner that would like to be recognized? Commissioner Ash, go right ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, commissioners, for your comments, and everybody who's here. This has been wonderful. I should be getting ready to leave the house soon to go out of town, but you know, I got engaged and listened to the conversation. I'm learning a lot here. Good speakers, good information. I know we do from the Pittsburgh group. Here in Norristown, we picked up one of the brochures that the commissioner gave us, and we're fine tuning it to our area, making it work with the information we're sharing, contact information, police information, what to do, hotlines and all that. So it's been very helpful in us as we're working with several groups, one being a gun violence prevention, as Mr. Pennington did say, for the PCCD group. So working with that gun violence prevention program and a grant, it has been very helpful to have the law enforcement officers available in those programs, have people in the community come together and make it so that it looks like a fun event, but an educational event. Like Commissioner Bradford Gray said, it was fun. We did a fun event. We did shots. We gave out food. We had the police chief there. We had the, other judges that were there. And so people were doing a lot of stuff at one time, but they were also learning about what was going on in the community. So happy to say that our basketball team that we're supporting through the grant in 19 is in the championship. So they're going to a little championship game. And two of the other kids that we're also sponsoring just came back from North Carolina for the Junior Olympics. So it's showing kids what you can do differently in the afternoons and weekends and nights, other than running around trying to create disturbances for these police department, because they're actually your friends. So they see that and they know it, and making the parents involved in training and in programming has been a big help. Because now you have the little people telling the older people what they should not do, how to deal with the police, what is right, what is wrong. So it's interesting to watch how the children lead the way. So listening to the different conversations, you are right. We have issues here where we need to address. Need to fix. It's not going to be done in one day, but we've heard it takes a village. So we're trying to be that village to make sure that we get out of this crisis that we're in. We work with law enforcement. We work with the community. We work with all of the different groups that are taking part in training and leadership and doing things the right way for the future of our community, especially in Pennsylvania. So I would love to keep the information. I'm sure we have it somewhere. We have the contact information for everyone who presented today. I like to travel, so I'm going to have Commissioner Bradford and also Commissioner Sanders, Lawful Sanders, in the car. And we're going to be heading out to different places because we're close together here, and take part in some of these events and bring it back to our community, because we're going to make this right. So thank you, Lieutenant Brown. I mean, this has been great. So I'm glad to have been able to witness this presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Ash. Would any other commissioner like to be recognized?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Two things that I think maybe, do we have one over here? We don't want to break somebody's equipment when we're their guests, right? Just pull it off. There were two things that I thought of as we were talking about these relationships. And our need and wanting to see consistency in professional law enforcement officers necessarily means we have to look at how we train them. Right now, we're hiring police officers at a higher rate than we pay educators. And yet our requirements are very, very different. The professional expertise that we would expect of professionals has to be developed somewhere along the way, and it far exceeds Act 120 certification. And so we have had discussions about the education component to create a qualified pool of applicants in the Commonwealth to relieve the burden of recruitment, to relieve the expense of recruitment as well as training. Are there options? Are there options that could possibly lead us down that path where somebody could make a choice? They could make a career choice coming right out, maybe through a high school direction, kind of a career path, to be a police officer. And they can go and have the equivalent of 2.5, 3, maybe 4 years, as they do in many other countries. We don't do it here, but they have places that people go to to become police officers. And when they come out, they're qualified, they can be hired right on the spot. That being one thing, if we want professional, we need to train professional. And the second thing had to do with a kind of a community issue right now. And that is the situation that the City of Pittsburgh Police Department and the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police find themselves in related to their state accreditation under the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission, which is under the sponsorship of Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police. Now, you can have a positive, a negative, or a so-so opinion about what accreditation, it brings a certain degree of bias with it, certainly, but it's something. And here in the city of Pittsburgh, Mr. Stevens, you'll recall, at the conclusion of the Department of Justice consent decree, there was an effort to do something that would assure the public that the expectations of the Department of Justice that Pittsburgh went through with the consent decree were going to be perpetuated, that there was a standard of policing that the public could count on. But the consent decree was a time-limited thing. It's gone. It was gone. It was done, finished, completed, achieved. What do we do now? And so we looked for an accreditation process. There's one, it's a national process that is, it's very, very expensive, and it's just, we couldn't consider that reasonably at the time. And we found the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation option. In 1997, the city of Pittsburgh was directed by ordinance to attain accreditation for the police bureau. There was an effort for a couple of years to do that, but that collapsed. And then the Pennsylvania law enforcement option came along, and in 2011, there was a concerted, dedicated effort with officers assigned to develop and comply to the accreditation standards under PLEAC, Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission. So it took them a couple of years. I think it was around 2014, the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police did achieve its state accreditation, which was a source of pride for those officers that worked so hard. And because we have, as Mr. Stevens and others have talked about, local exercise of autonomy, the local legislators have tried to create practices in their communities for harm reduction, such as the traffic stop ordinance that both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh have, and now the pending stop and frisk legislation here in the city of Pittsburgh. I'm not sure where Philly stands on it, and I'm not aware of other communities that have similar legislation. But those ordinances have now compromised the ability of those two cities to maintain their accreditation. And that's a serious, it's a policy issue, it's a trust issue. If we have to think about it, and I don't know that there's anything we can necessarily do about it, except to engage in discussion with people who have influence in that realm, particularly the Chiefs of Police Association, so that we can understand how we could take something away that was of value, that meant something to the communities, that gave communities a reason to trust that their consistency, the professional standards of policing, are consistent across the Commonwealth. It is something that we own in Pennsylvania. It was created as a result of our learning process in Pennsylvania. So when the communities have reached that level, it should not preclude the ability of the locality to recognize the health of the relationship between their police and their citizens, or lose their accreditation. That's a Hobson's choice. What do you do? So I think it would be, since we're talking about what we're talking about today, that civilian oversight and the relationships, I think it's something that's pertinent and we should be aware of and anticipate, and perhaps create a strategy to intervene so that the discussions are in the interest of all of our people in the Commonwealth, the officers, the chiefs of police expectation, and the citizens.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any other commissioners who'd like to be heard? Do we have any? Commissioner Lawful Sanders. Ma'am, you have the floor.
So good afternoon to all of you. I'm probably one of the quieter commissioners that sits here and listens to all the expertise that I hear. Commissioner Ashley shaking her head. I'm not quiet in Montgomery County, but I'm quiet on this commission because I'm trying to learn as much as I can. Many of you are not aware that I have been working with police officers for over 2 decades. And so part of what I see with this commission is that we have to develop the kind of relationships that will encourage trust beyond folks thinking that we're trying to take something from them or making them feel put out and we're asking questions. This is new to all of us. There's no other commission like this in the country, right? We're all starting from scratch here. And so based on what I am hearing, it just really comes down to us working closer together. I've had police officers who have said to me they want the oversight. They do. They see some things happening in the police departments and they're afraid to speak up about it, right? And when something horrible happens, then they just don't feel like they have the support that they need to get where they need to go. I also agree with Commissioner Pittinger that training, like consistent training that helps them to move across, because things are changing in our communities so frequently all the time. And after George Floyd, we've had a mass exodus of quite a few police officers who don't feel like they know what they're getting from the heads of their departments, plus the communities. And so there's all this conversation. My question is, I loved, like everyone else, all the dialogue that I heard from the folks in Pittsburgh. I'm trying to think of how can we learn, and the gentleman from Philadelphia, Irachi, I believe his name is, how can we combine all of that and instead of working in our silos, kind of pull together, right? And take some of the best, the things that are working best for all of us to pull together for the department and for the people in our cities. I'm an African-American woman, you see my face, right? I've had a son who had his hand broken by a police officer when he was 15 years old. And because of my work and what I have been doing, we really worked that out with the police department. It didn't turn into anything that was outrageous, and there was the Human Relations Commission got involved, and we all worked together to do what we needed to do. It was then really that I decided that I wanted to work with police officers, to learn more about who they are. What are they bringing to the table? How can we work in conjunction with the community? Because if we continue to talk at each other and be offended by the things that we're hearing on either side, then we're not going to get much done. So I'm grateful for these conversations. I want to hear more about them. Like Commissioner Bradford Gray says, I've been in some of these trainings with police officers all around the country, driven to Alabama, met with police chiefs there. I have been at it very quietly, just learning what I can so that we can get some solutions for the folks that are being impacted by police officers every day. The truth of the matter is, there's some people who are in police forces should never ever have gotten there. And so it's all about working and the training so that those who are doing their most excellent job, those who love what they're doing and have been doing it quite well, will be able to then have the kind of relationship so we can do what we need to do to stave some of the bleeding in our communities. And because like everywhere else, they're bad teachers, bad police officers, bad everything else, right? Not everyone is good in each profession. So how can we pull all of this together and create a better working environment for the state agency and for those of us who are sitting on the commission to see how we can get the best desired results for the people of the Commonwealth, not for us. Am I making sense?
Sir?
You are.
Chairman Brown, if I may.
Go ahead, sir. Mr. Stevens, you have the floor.
I appreciate those remarks and comments. I have a recommendation that I hope you consider and implement. The Mayor's Task Force on Policing that I sat on had about 15 people. We met every week for about 3.5 months. Every week. I have a folder, a drawer at home, literally this long, this deep, all about policing. Had stuff all over the living room floor when I was working on this. My suggestion is that Beth, who is here in Pittsburgh, I saw Lisa Franks from the mayor's administration last week. She's in a key position. Is it chief policy officer or something like that? Chief operating officer. She mentioned to me last Saturday at an anti-violence event in Homewood, in Pittsburgh, that she was almost done. The presentation is going to be coming out from all the work that has been done in Pittsburgh in the implementation phase. It's quite numerous in terms of the specific actions that have been implemented. And it's all being recorded on paper. My suggestion is, because we did take those 3.5 months on a weekly basis to create suggestions, and then the Black Political Empowerment Project, BPEP, with our partners, with these follow-up meetings over the last probably 1.5 years, we're on the edge now of moving this information into a complete report of this is what's happening. This is what has happened, is happening, and about to happen. That you, being this commission, share that throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Save yourself some time, because we took the time. You don't have to reproduce wheels that have already been created. Doesn't mean you can't add to the wheel, add another spoke or 2 or 3. But take that report of actions that have begun to be implemented and about to be implemented, and share it with the police departments throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Secondly, one of them mentioned that the brochure that we worked on out of the death of Johnny Gamage, and that Beth and I have been working on a few occasions in the last few years to revise, that, and we've written it in a way, again, with police input. That's important to know, that the Police Bureau of Pittsburgh worked with us hand in hand. That's on the most recent You and the Police brochure, that it be shared with all the police departments throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and they in turn share it with their school boards, with their school systems, with their citizens. To augment that, there is a video on the You and the Police brochure that could be sent across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's recorded by an actor in Pittsburgh, Wally Jamal, who has acted in every one of the August Wilson 10 plays. He took the time to take our brochure and create it as a video. A lot of people like videos more than looking at a brochure. Lastly, we just had a staff meeting within the Black Political Empowerment Project and the Greater Pittsburgh Coalition Against Violence. We're about to launch a campaign, I believe by August 15th, next Friday. We're going to have a TikTok, Facebook competition where people will be asked on, well, actually, we're going to be doing that for what to do with civic engagement. And that impacts what we do with policing, because if people get more involved in the political system, they have more of an opportunity to impact the policing within their own local communities. So we're putting that TikTok competition of how people can get involved in the political system and how they must vote in each and every election. We're also having a separate, which is somewhat related, competition for some of our local community groups in a TikTok and Facebook competition on how to utilize certain sections of our anti-violence document. And in the addendum of our document is the You and the Police brochure, which we just made sure very recently that we updated the online version of Strategies for Change creating more peaceful communities, that we put in the most current You and the Police brochure. So that document is an anti-violence document, which I would assume the commission would have some interest in supporting, because when we lessen the violence of how we all interact, we lessen police interactions with our citizens. Am I right? It has 833 strategies, 38 sections impacting violence, 142 pages, which Mark Morial, our National Urban League president, called one of the most comprehensive anti-violence documents in the country. Doesn't mean anything, it was not being utilized. So that is a little more indirect approach. But again, if we lessen violence, we lessen the opportunities for our police to interact with our kids, interact with our adults. And hopefully, because in that document is the You and the Police brochure as well, that we create more positive interactions between our community and our police, and particularly our young people. But I am suggesting you seriously consider the use of the video on what to do when stopped by the police, and as well as the brochure be marketed. And Beth has set it up in a way that the information should not really be changed, because then again, it was approved by the Police Bureau of Pittsburgh, but that one panel, she set it up so you can alter the panel for your local information, contact information, for whatever your Citizen Police Review Board is, or whatever your police bureau, whatever Beth may want, but we've set it up so that document can be implemented, marketed throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and beyond.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stevens, that was distributed through the commission, and some of our commissioners are using it.
I did hear one had mentioned, and I was glad to hear that.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, that we in generally look at best practices and reports from entities across the nation. And certainly, if we have a report that's coming from, that a lot of hard work goes into that stuff, a lot of research is done. Right. It's the type of thing that, you know, Fortune 500 companies pay millions of dollars for entities to come in and do on their behalf. And whenever we can have a community group or one of our sister oversight groups do that kind of report for us, we take those recommendations that they have, and a lot of them are very similar to or solutions or suggested solutions to problems that we are encountering as we go through our reviews. So that is certainly something that we would be interested in, and something that we would certainly consider as we go forward in the reviews that we do. And as Beth pointed out on the You and the Police brochure, that is something that I've certainly looked at.
Chairman Brown, it's a little hard to hear you.
I think that it was Brenda, it was Commissioner Tate who first kind of brought that to our attention in one of our committee meetings, that it was this You and the Police brochure out there, and shortly thereafter, in one of our recommendations that we made to our current agency, we recommended a very similar approach to that, sort of turning the reins over to the agency to create something. And also part of that component was both the video that you mentioned, and part of the component was actually using the brochure, the information from, in sort of their social media sites. So what they have on Facebook, what they have on Twitter, and that sort of thing. Absolutely. So that information can not only get out physically through the brochure, but also digitally through those social networking platforms. So definitely everything you said, we are definitely in support of, and have been supporting. That. So thank you.
All right.
Yes. Do we have, at this time, I'd like to open the floor for any public comment regarding issues discussed today. Do we have any public comment? Mr. Arache? Mr. Arache, you have the floor, sir. Go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Andrea. I wanted to address what you said briefly, if I can.
Yes, sir.
So one of the ways how as oversight agencies that we sort of bring all of this together is really collaboration and symbiosis, right? So it has to be normal for a police officer to know that their case, actions, incidents will be reviewed by civilian oversight, and that oversight is disciplined and professional and not, just out to get police officers. I want police officers that are confident that if a case is investigated by CPOC, that the truth will set them free or not. You want those things to be evident. You want integration with police operations. Like, I'll give you an example. We reformed our disciplinary process, the PBI process, over the last year and a half, where we now have a civilian and a member of the police department that evaluates interdepartmental charges, right? So now you have civilian eyes, and you have, and this creates legitimacy in charging and outcomes. We also have civilians that are now on the adjudication panel for internal allegations of misconduct. So now and we also have formalized the jury sheets, the panel sheets, so you have not only civilian participation in the adjudication process, but a memorialization of the deliberations and outcomes. So when you vote, when a police officer who's also on the panel votes, they have to justify that vote, right? And we did all of these things to integrate it because it creates legitimacy to the process, right? So we don't want to guide outcomes, right? We want a process that residents and police officers can trust, right? So you do that by making it professional, disciplined, and normal, right? So when policy work is reviewed, when internal policy work is reviewed by an outside agency and input is given, right? Then the public can be confident that civilians have reviewed this process. The process is transparent and legitimate. Additionally, reporting of stats and data, you bring these things together. A lot of times, there are things that in departments that even officers who are in the department don't realize occur. And when you like for example, our legislation has a reporting requirement that is incredibly extensive. And so when you have not only residents that can review it, but officers can review it, it provides practical information that hopefully it can combat bias, right? It's different for an officer to say, well, when I'm out there in the 14th district, I've never seen anybody behave in a biased way, right? But if we have stats that apply just to your district that say, look, here's what you guys do and when you do it and how you do it and who does it and to who, right? Then you're talking about something you're not arguing about. Right? And you're all operating from the same set of facts, and that's a big part of it. That's why collaboration is so important, because you want residents to be confident in the process. You want officers to be confident in the process, and you want residents to believe. It's a great public safety issue. Like they used to tell people in Philly used to say, oh, when you're pulled over, if the officer's behaving strangely or badly or in a way you think is wrong, there's not the time to confront the issue, that you should make a complaint. Well, our report showed that less than 1% of the time those complaints actually came to some kind of discipline, right? So why would anyone do that, right? It doesn't make any sense to uphold your tongue and go through this process. That's ridiculous. Our goal there is to integrate the process, so when an officer is behaving badly, a resident can say with confidence internally, oh, I'm going to wait. I know that CPOC's there. I know that they'll investigate it, and I know that whatever the outcome is, I can believe it. Those are things that make officers more safe. Those are things that make residents more safe. So really, it's sort of this blending. And that is all derived from legitimacy and proper authority, right? Your agencies can't beg for information, right? Like ours, that's what we used to do. But now, we don't beg. Right, like our and our police department has been a good partner, like in that regard, like that. They know that they have to provide information. We are a disciplined professional agency. It's not different than sharing information with any other disciplined professional agency. And, you know, and the reality is they know that through that process that we shoot straight. You know, it's going to be whatever it is. The facts will guide it. I mean, the days where a city council has to pass an ordinance to stop the police department like we did with the driving equity bill, I hope we're in the rear view. I hope that through oversight and the professional and disciplined execution of oversight, that you get a police department that, you know, knows sort of the boundaries of the road and knows what's expected of them and can be more successful at making the public safer. But also, we're close together, so please contact me and we can talk more after this.
Absolutely, that's a date. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Brown, I think we would be remiss, even though she didn't state an interest in speaking when you asked. As I said, on Tuesday, we're scheduled to review the update on the proposed legislation on stop and frisk in Pittsburgh. And one of the things that we've been advocating is much more detail in why people are being stopped. That's so important. Most of us sitting here probably, if we didn't get a grade, we probably wouldn't have studied as much as some of us may have studied if we weren't trying to get an A or a B. So in that realm, if police are not given the responsibility of saying, why are they stopping you? They probably may stop people for other reasons that are inappropriate. It's a human thing. So in the room is the president and founder of Alliance for Police Accountability, Brandy Fisher, and I don't know if she would want to say something while she's in the room because we may be missing her young wisdom.
Is Brandy here? Would Brandy like to come up and?
I thought that was Brandy. I'm sorry, that's not Brandy Fisher. Didn't you like Brandy Fisher? I'm sorry, she's not here, but she'll be here Tuesday. But I take that back. I'm sorry.
No worries at all, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So again, I want to thank all our panelists for joining our discussion today. You have done a great service for our commission and the citizens of the Commonwealth. Thanks again for your participation in this panel. Once again, our commission has proven that law enforcement reforms can support both our law enforcement officers and the citizens of the Commonwealth they serve, and be a tool to identify systematic deficiencies and provide a path for corrective actions and reduce the risk of harm to our citizens during encounters with law enforcement. Through our Commonwealth citizen oversight and advisory groups that we have here, we have proven that our citizens can be an active participant in shaping how they are policed. We thank our panelists, volunteer citizens-led commissioners, our support staff who are here. Thank you, Pittsburgh, for hosting us. You guys did a fantastic job setting everything up for us. Our covered agencies and the citizens who have supported us for their work now and into the future. I thank you. As a reminder, our future meeting agendas, public comment forms, speaker request forms, and more information about the commission can be found on the Office of State Inspector General's webpage at www.osig.pa.gov/PSLECAC. Individuals with questions regarding this commission should contact the Bureau of Law Enforcement Oversight within the Pennsylvania Office of State Inspector General by calling area code 717-787-6835. Media inquiries should be directed to Jonathan Hendrickson, Deputy State Inspector General for External Affairs, at area code 717-265-8396. Our next commission meeting will be held in person in Harrisburg on Friday, October 28th from 10 to 2 at the PCCD building at 3101 North Front Street in Harrisburg. At this time, I'll move to adjourn. Do we have any objections? All right. Have a great afternoon.